everybody say goodnight and all that.
Okay.
Yeah.
Hi, welcome. Thanks for joining us. We haven't started yet. We're just populating the room and having a quick little conversation. So feel free to say something in the chat, say hello if you'd like, and thanks for joining us.
Aimee, when was the last time you were out here a while ago? Were you in Seattle?
A while. I mean, I guess it was
after Oceanic. You did something at.
I was at the Seattle Arts and Lectures.
Right, that was it. Yeah.
Yeah, that was the last time. It was such a great venue, such a great event. But yeah, I just kept thinking, oh well, I'll definitely be back. You know, when World of Wonder.
We're usually on the Milkweed circuit, so.
Yeah.
They did a beautiful job. I just now yesterday saw the finished book with the art in it that the advanced copy didn't have quite. Yeah.
Good. Yeah, they were a dream. They were really the only ones who didn't flinch when I said, you know, I would like to have some drawings, and so many other presses were like, drawings, what are you talking, you know? And Milkweed, just any crazy idea I had, they were a dream to work with. So yeah, hang on one second. I'm just gonna look up some little thing here. Rick, do you know, or maybe John, I don't know if Karen mentioned this, I'll be able to share my screen, right? Are we kind of co-hosts or no?
No, I tried to share something to them, but I think they can turn that off, but you can't.
Yeah, ask Karen. She's busy letting people in. Okay.
Yeah, no worries if we can't. Just thought it might be fun. Yeah, it's not crucial to the presentation or anything like that. All right, let me see.
John, I had a note today.
We should be able to share now.
Ruth says hello over in, you're over here and she's over there now.
I know, she landed shortly before, like right before we left.
Right.
And then promptly lost her passport.
I know she's got the ordeal going, you know, being in quarantine and not being able to get a passport.
Yeah, and then, you know, that embassy's closed and This sounds like a nightmare.
At least, yeah, well, it was, you know, the passport was a big deal, but she didn't lose everything else, phone and credit cards and all that. But
have you had your first class, Aimee?
Yeah, we're on this will be the third week of the semester.
Oh, wow, you start early.
Yeah, we're doing a compressed schedule. We're supposed to be done by November 17th because they don't, yeah, it's wild. They don't, and I'm actually kind of grateful. They don't want students to go home for Thanksgiving and then come back. You know what I mean? That kind of thing. So
it's kind of smart.
Yeah, I mean, actually, I have to give credit where credit is due. You know, like what a novel idea. We're trying to save the community, you know, from war spread. So, yeah. So, but as a result, I've had to retool everything to fit a little bit more of a compressed schedule. Yeah.
What are you
teaching? John, are you teaching this fall?
Yeah, I just taught my first class.
Well, so that's also why you had to get back. You had to get back for that.
Well, actually,
but you didn't. You've done that remotely.
Yeah, it's remote, and although they've asked us, I never come home, and you're in the kitchen like.
No, he's been at restaurants with my husband and I, and we linger over the calamari section. We don't order it. But I think he's annoyed that we even lingered, that we even considered it anymore. So he's just done with that. So, and that is also that adds another element too. If it was probably, I don't know what it would be like if my husband and I would go back to eating calamari if we didn't have children. I don't know, but now that at least my youngest will still eat it all the time. They're night and day different. But my eldest, I don't want to face, he's almost like the octopus looking at me, you know, he has a judgmental look, so I can't do it. Stronger people could, but not me. Are you vegetarian, John?
No, but I think after this summer, I will be closer and closer to it.
Yeah, it's hard. I mean, like, in the summer, it's also so easy for me anyway to eat vegetables and be fine with it. I don't miss it really. You know?
Yeah, I don't. We had a barbecue this summer at the house, so it was kind of hard. I don't know, just grilling a vegetable is different than fish.
Yeah,
But
yeah.
of course, you know, I'm talking to the wrong person to talk about how fish don't feel.
Yeah, yeah.
Okay, I think you two, we better, because you're almost into what we're doing tonight.
Yeah, yeah.
We'll step back just for a moment. I'll say a few things and then you two
Great.
can continue. For everyone that's come into this, welcome. Thank you so much for joining us. You've been getting, depending on when you came in, you've been getting some of Aimee Nezukumatathil and John Freeman. Aimee joining us from Oxford, Mississippi, and John just returned from a summer in London, is with us from New York. They will be talking and maybe doing a little bit of reading from recently published books, and both of them have a lot they could say about their own work and each other's books. And I'm not sure what all you'll hear from tonight, but I will mention a few of the books that you may hear of or from. With Aimee, I'm going to go in not the new, from older to newest order. And because we're Elliott Bay, we're here in Seattle, we're also in the backyard of Copper Canyon Press, which is a bit of a connector here tonight, if there was in need of one. But Aimee's an extraordinary poet and has had 4 collections, most recent of which is Copper Canyon, published 2 years ago, Oceanic, which has much of the same focus and concerns and interests and as this book this is the newest book that just came out in finished form. It's her first book of prose called World of Wonders. It's a book of essays, which might also be called prose poems. I think there's about 30 pieces, and you know, none of them are really long, but they're beautiful, intense lyric writing, and it's beautifully illustrated. If you we were doing this, you see an illustrator, Fumi Mini Nakamura, who did that, and their color and everything. Marine life, plant life, as they were just, John and Aimee were just talking, are abiding concerns here, along with the place of humans within it. And these pieces have parts of her life growing up, different places in the US, different places where family's from, where she has traveled, and all that. So it's a delightful, wonderful book. And you'll hear more of that and from that. John is someone we've presented more often in the past, but even then we've had trouble keeping up with what he has done in the last year or so. Actually, this is, I think, all this year. Earlier this year, a book of his own prose, which came out before all that's going on now in terms of pandemic and the unrest that arose after George Floyd's murder and Breonna Taylor. But this book called Dictionary of the Undoing, which is a brilliant prose lexicon, using terms, keeping language, the meaning of language, of real language, you know, making claims for it, because so much language is being misused and abused, and in various forms. We certainly know what a lot of that is politically in this country right now, but even just underlying keeping language and what is in it there is a concern. And there's also then a recent, John's probably, oh, he's starting to become known for other things too, known for his anthologies. He first came to a lot of awareness, besides being a stellar book reviewer, as the editor of Granta, and now is editing a biannual publication called Freeman's, which will have a new one out next month, on the theme of love, where he engages writers to write, or he finds writers and an extraordinary range. And he's also done a series that started with New York, and then the US, and now the whole planet, as in a Tales of Two Planets, which is an international array of writers writing with climate, there we go, Aimee, climate change as part of what everyone's dealing with, something not being talked about enough with all the other things being talked about this year in this country. But most recent, and connecting back to the Oceanic part for Aimee, is Copper Canyon's just published John's second book of poems, The Park, which follows his earlier collection, Maps. a book that I think he got to live a little more this summer, spending it in London, spending more time in parks, and in than this book has a lot of Paris in it. And Aimee is again holding this up. Aimee, so we're doing this program, and Aimee and John will take their turns reading and talking. There's also, of course, as I've been holding these books up, as Aimee's also been doing it, books that are available from Elliott Bay. All of these books are, as well as Aimee's other books, and John has a few other books, including other editions of Freeman's. And I think Aimee, I can't remember the part of this, if you order a copy of Aimee's book, World of Wonders, some lucky person will also get a copy of The Park, I think, as part of that. I think you'll want these books after you hear more of them tonight. And part of the fun for us at Elliott Bay is being open again in limited ways, but it is watching people get to come in and see these books, and for us to be able to actually literally put them in their hands. So I think I will turn this over to, they were already on a good roll. And so also, if you have questions, you can put them, I think, in the Q&A part on the bottom of your screen. That's probably easier, or you can possibly, because chat has some things for other concerns. And I think they will kind of field those out, join in. We've already had Carrie Arsenal chiming in after John mentioned her book. And if Aimee was going to pull that up, I really would have been impressed. It's like, a little cue. Anyway, and then at the end, so I'm about to disappear, and you will be in their wonderful, capable hands. These are two writers with great sense of wonder, a great sense of curiosity, which is a trait way too rare in our day and age, and empathy, and also just clear moral sense of things. So in the human world and in the more than human world both. So with that, and the way we give our good attention to them now, the applause they can't hear, what would be a wonderful room, including people from all over that aren't even here in Seattle, chiming in. Please welcome Aimee Nezukumatathil and John Freeman. Thank you.
Thanks so much, Rick.
Thanks, Rick. Thank you.
So nice to share a computer screen with you, Aimee.
I know. I feel like I've been tracking your travels via, social media over the summer, but it's nice to feel like we're in the same space kind of in some way, even though you're on the, up north and I'm here in the south.
I had so much fun reading your book because although I think we had very different childhoods, because of how we were probably perceived where we lived, we're roughly the same age. I moved around a lot. I was born in Ohio. And so Scooby-Doo and McGruff Crime Stoppers, Madonna concerts and Live Aid. You hit some of the notes as Jelly Sandals were not mine, but I remember them very clearly. And then a lot of the plants and animal life you described here were things that were fascinating to me growing up in the West, saguaros. And if you haven't read Aimee's book, it's kind of like a living memory palace in which each room is animated by a living thing that she wraps a story of her childhood around, growing up the daughter of two people that work in the medical field, a psychiatrist and a respiratory therapist, her mother from the Philippines, her father from Kerala, and describing growing up in America of the 70s and 80s as sort of one of two, young brown girls with hard to pronounce long names in Kansas and Ohio and Western New York, which, by the way, I also lived in growing up.
Why did that?
I found it so mesmerizing the way that you make a story out of this. And the question I wanted to ask you was, you have a chapter in there about moving from New York to Ohio, and you have a year spent alone in the library. This kind of cellophane year you describe, and you say it was really important to you because you kind of wrote yourself into being, and metaphor became important to you. And what I want to ask you, as a writer who writes about the natural world, one thing this book does so beautifully is that you never map the human entirely on the non-human. In fact, it's more often going the other way around. You look at the world around you and the things you're writing about. And I wonder if you agree with that assessment of your sort of direction of comparison, and if you do, like where that impulse comes from, instead of to anthropomorphize everywhere.
Yeah. That's such, well, thank you so much. It's such a good, smart question. And by the way, this is such a small little thing. You're the first person to get my parents' occupations correct. I think almost every interview or chat I've had, they've always just said like 2 doctors, and or they switched ethnicities of Filipino dad, and so props to you for getting all the details correct. Anyway, yeah. So I think I've said this enough times, so it's not a secret anymore, and I feel kind of sheepish saying this because I'm a professor of English, but the books that I read the most of still now, even as a kid and still now, are not literature. It's actually, and I read a lot of literature, but I read a ton more science and natural history and history and nature writing, and that's always been the books that I've turned to really since before I can remember. There was no kind of kids literature in my house. The running joke is I thought Dr. Seuss was one of my mom's coworkers. I mean, I just didn't, it was just not, that world was not there. So I've been so jealous of my sons have these really extensive libraries of kids books and stuff. And it wasn't because my parents were keeping me away from that book. They just, they didn't really have those kinds of books in the Philippines, or they didn't have access to those books in the Philippines and India. But when they would take us to the library, they'd dump us off in the, the kids section. And I'd always sneak over to the kind of adult, like science section, because that was just so much more fascinating to me. So I already had this vocabulary and diction already kind of in my head. And that's how I've processed the world, is through this vocabulary of the natural world. If I'm talking about a breakup or something, I don't, the metaphors that I pull from are from the outdoors, are from nature, recently from Oceanic, there was a story of starfish just off the coast here, just off the coast of Seattle here. And scientists still don't know, they were pulling their arms literally off of themselves. So, killing themselves essentially because they were poisoned. And I set out to write about that. And then I didn't realize, oh, actually I'm writing about an old love, but the language and the metaphors I was using for that relationship all came from these starfish that were pulling its arms off. So, yeah, I don't know. That's a kind of a big answer to your question, but the gist of it is the vocabulary and diction from the natural world has always been kind of in my wheelhouse, because those are I would make stories from that vocabulary since I was a kid.
Mm. And one of the things I love about how you write about the ocean and marine life and all the forms of life you write about in this book is it can be tempting in this period to write everything as an elegy.
Yeah.
And some of your chapters are like, did you know that there is a kind of salamander of sorts that can regrow its entire body? And so I've this book reminds me how,
John, I feel like you're dragging me. That's like in a nutshell what basically my book is. It's all like, did you know?
No, but that's exactly how I would go to a library as a kid. You look at some book about bears and think, oh my God, they sleep for like 4, and you just learn facts that are they're almost beyond metaphor. That they're sort of, they recreate the field of reality because the details are so vivid.
Yeah. Oh, thank you so much.
Some of this come about because you were writing the poems in Oceanic, because some of these essays kind of slip into the slipstream of some of those poems.
I don't know. I was they overlapped a little bit. One of the earliest essays in this collection was written when I was still in grad school. My MFA is actually in nonfiction and poetry, and it's a reworked form. But there's a monsoon and peacocks. Those those were mostly done in grad school as part of my thesis, my MFA thesis. But I kind of put that aside, and I had some early success with poetry, and I kind of just focused on that while these essays were kind of simmering in the back. But I think those have always been my concerns. You know, I've just always been so fascinated by that. And so by these animals and plants. And originally I had 200. I had a list in my notebook, 200, like a wish list of 200 plants and animals. And so this collection could have been quadruple, the size, but I really was winnowing it down to where are the ones that I kind of had that emotion that you said, like, where I was, if not enthusiastic itself about the animal, enthusiastic about the plant or the animal, but also I had to be like so excited, like wanting to share with a friend, so that helped me separate, okay, I feel medium about this particular salamander, but not about the axolotl, and so to me, that was my own litmus test of where the astonishment came.
This is the only book by a poet in America that casually drops a line, "The last time I was snorkeling in the South China Sea." And one of the things that's really charming about it is how much space you give the other forms of life in the book, and sort of gently wrapping your own story, your family stories around. And I think about this in the context of the narwhal or the whale shark, which you describe swimming with.
Yeah.
But you basically glance off the description of swimming with the whale shark to think, well, that probably wasn't very smart, given that I have 2 children, and they could have, been one of those footnotes in the Darwin Awards.
Yeah.
But what are some of your favorite encounters here? Because there's lots of different types of encounters.
Yeah, well, the whale shark was definitely, that was a bucket item list, and I wanted to include that. I've been wanting to, that's my favorite shark in the universe. And, but it's also, I also wanted to keep it real, and I was not swimming with them in the wild. This is in a curated place where you have to, apply to snorkel with them, and it's in an aquarium, the Atlanta Aquarium. And there's something about even saying that phrase that's not natural at all, but yet I just needed to see it. The fact that I could be within feet of a shark, and in my case, inches away from a whale shark, was more than I could. When I got the email saying I'd been approved, I couldn't turn it down. So I really went into it with a totally different mindset, and I talk about it in the book. I ended up weeping, as I was taking off my wetsuit, because I just realized, what am I doing? I'm contributing to this. I know this aquarium is a research aquarium. They rehabilitate sharks and bring them back to the wild, but yet these sharks are the size of a school bus. There's no aquarium that should have them. You know what I mean? That's really what it came down to. It is like, as much as I'm grateful to have that experience, nothing about it was natural. And it was important for me to include that there, so that people see that it's very complex. It's not just, oh, save the world, recycle, save all these animals. I'm also part of, I also have some things to improve on. I also have some things, I need to put the mirror back on myself as well. And yet there was, this tank. Have you been to the Georgia Aquarium at all?
Mm-mm.
It's in downtown Atlanta, which is also great. It's in the Olympic, what is it called? Olympic Park. Anyone from Atlanta here? It's where they have the Olympics. So a whale shark, let alone 3 of them, there was 3 in the tank at the time. 3 whale sharks should not be anywhere in downtown Atlanta. It's like across from the Omni, It's so, everything about it is unnatural. And yet it was such an exhilarating experience. I was also swimming with a hammerhead shark, which in hindsight, that was probably also not too smart. Anyway, so
on the edge of their head.
That's right.
Right. Okay.
That's
so
right.
They're all kind of looking at you from their.
Exactly. You don't know what they're looking at. One eye's here, and you could be in the middle, and And yeah, so they were just very, and also it was a female shark, which is 9 feet long, and female hammerheads are one of they're more commonly known to attack humans. But the people at the aquarium are like, don't worry, we feed them before you get in the tank. And I was like, well, okay, is someone going to be like, you know, is someone going to be able to fight off this, 1,000-pound shark if it decides it's still hungry, Yes, there you go. Next to the Coca-Cola Museum, as someone put in the chat, there's you can take all the colas in the world. The more I say it out loud, the more ridiculous it sounds, but that's what it is. And yet I am who I am because of aquariums and zoos. My parents took me to the Shedd Aquarium in Chicago, the Chicago's Museum of Natural History, the Lincoln Park Zoo, the San Diego Zoo. And so I had that chance to be astonished up close by all these animals. And I also had the opportunity to go snorkel in the South China Sea. But it was zoos and aquariums that helped make me be more curious about the world.
Yeah, I went to the San Diego Zoo when I was about 10.
Oh, okay.
It had an immense impression upon me because they have that sort of fake safari that you go on. And the animals are just right out there in the open. And I remember seeing a peacock at that zoo as well. And you mentioned the piece, you mentioned peacocks, but one of the sort of core, I think, pieces of this whole book is a description of being in a classroom, and because you grow up in a household with many peacocks, you draw one and you're sort of corrected. And I wonder if you can talk about that piece and that experience, because it seems sort of at the root of a shift that means that you have to kind of relearn or at least reassert your ability to define what is joyful to you.
Yeah. It's I don't know how many people know, but peacocks are the national bird of India. So it would be the equivalent of like growing up with a bunch of American eagles all over your house, and I didn't think I was so proud of them. I thought they were the most, I still think they're the most exquisite bird. And the gist of it is there was a animal drawing contest, and all my classmates were drawing like really the most basic, like kitties, puppies, bunnies, like little domestic pets. I chose the peacock, and then my teacher, I still can't, as an educator now, I still don't actually understand what was going on. I still can't really piece it together, but she made this whole big demonstration, really like weirdly passive aggressive, except she was standing right behind me and like tapping my desk. So it was definitely referring to me. Like some of us didn't understand the assignment. She also taught to me, like, by the way, like I didn't understand English, even though I was born in Chicago. She would be like, Aimee, do you understand me? I'm like, yeah, because I don't speak any other language but English, Anyway, she said that the assignment was to draw American animals, and I had to start over basically and skip recess, even though that wasn't part of the original, assignment at all. I would have remembered. I was teacher's pet all my life, essentially. And so that's the worst thing you can do to a third grader, is keep them in from recess, or at least the worst thing you can do to me. And so just, I remember being so embarrassed, just so palpably embarrassed. Everybody's eyes turned to me. And so I just was like, okay, I guess I do misunderstand the assignment. I'm going to draw the most American thing I can think of, which was the bald eagle. And just, it's my own little sassiness. I drew this giant flag sticking out of the eagle's nest just to hammer it home that this was an American eagle, not a Philippine eagle, anything like that. And I ended up winning the contest for the entire grade. So I was disgusted with all of it. I was not proud. I was not happy about it. But the part that I regret the most is that I went home and my beloved stoic dad, I was, sassy third grader, and I was like, gosh, why do we have all these peacocks in our home? And I even said, like, it's so embarrassing. Can we clean these up? And he did, just quietly he did. They were gone the next day. And I didn't have the vocabulary for it or what, but I'm so, now looking back, I'm so deeply ashamed, but all I ever wanted to do was be just like my classmates, have no differences whatsoever. Differences weren't encouraged by any means. And all I wanted to do was like be blonde, blue-eyed, just have no teacher single me out for anything. And it wasn't until years later when I almost like reclaimed the peacock. So now I have like peacock decor, flamingos, toucans, all over my house as much as my husband will let me. And it's, actually one small little design note is on the book. My name is in peacock blue shimmer foil is what it's called. And that is a nod to that essay, but also in the essay it talks, I don't want to give too much away, but it talks about how that was my favorite color always, but I wanted nothing to do with that for most of basically through junior high. But that's a little nod to that essay, but also I had in grad school a poet I shall not name, a former US poet laureate, came through and was like, Aimee, you need to change your name if you ever hope to be published. I was like, okay, I didn't ask, but thank you. So the folks at Milkweed, the design team was just so amazing. When we were talking about the layout of the cover and everything, they're like, we could actually make your name stand out a little bit more. And I was like, really? And they're like, how about peacock shimmer foil? And I was like, yes, please. So it was just, so that's my little bit of extra, that's my like thumbing my nose at the teacher as well as anyone who told me I should change my last name.
It seems like some of the animals that you write about or some of the marine life, like the vampire squid, which can literally turn itself inside out, become a pineapple, that they have a similar equivocal relationship to blending in and to standing out.
Yeah.
Like standing out can be a form of charm, but it can also be threat at the same time.
Absolutely.
And you make a lot with that across the course of the book, sort of because you're in all these different locations and you're growing up and you're learning to wear makeup and go out and you're, discovering the kind of panopticon of being a young woman in America at that time, and certainly probably now too.
Mm-hmm.
Was there any kind of, or has there been an animal that you've really suddenly taken to heart as not a mascot, but as something that is the way that you want to be, and in terms of its ability to handle that kind of push and pull of regard?
It's gosh, I mean, that question, I could, depending on the hour of the day or depending on my mood, that could switch, that could switch on a dime. But there's something, gosh, I would have to say something from the bird world, something from the ocean, something from land. There's something so sleek about, and I was born in the year of the tiger, but there's something I love about Bengal tigers as well. I don't know. I don't think I'm a tiger. I just think there's something that's so beautiful that they're orange and black striped, and yet they can actually camouflage themselves in a green forest. It's actually stunning. Like, I don't know the science behind it. It's actually one of the things I'm actually working on, but how something so orange can camouflage itself in green that's one of my current wonderments right now, and I love how protective they are of their young. There's something so sleek about their movements, but I do love that they stand out more than lions, and yet they can also blend in when they need to. So kind of similarly along the lines of the other animals I talk about, the Bengal tiger, And they're also making a comeback too. You know, they were really on the brink of extinction. And I had been to a tiger sanctuary in Kerala the last time I visited, and it is stunning to see how you don't really notice until you're actually kind of a few feet in front of them. Their just for example, their shoulder muscle is like maybe, I don't know, as wide as my shoulders, and like that's one muscle, that's one arm muscle. It's just, they're just a striking, magnificent animal. So none of that I think is necessarily me. I guess I may be interpreting your question as just which animal am I in awe of right now as a way to be kind of, I don't know, they're just so strong to me. Yeah.
We were talking earlier, we are friends on Instagram, and I was admiring your dog and you were admiring the dog that we were dog sitting this summer. And I had this kind of Satori moment with Uma, the Great Dane, who is close to 200 pounds.
Yeah.
I was just looking at her, and she's one of the most beautiful living things I've ever seen.
Hmm.
And it was,
yeah, I can't get over a 200-pound dog. Anyway, go ahead.
well, actually, what I wanted to ask you about was, is how do each of the different forms, I mean, because you're writing about plants, you're writing about, marine life, animals, you're writing about monsoons, which is kind of a force of nature. So you're writing across the whole natural spectrum, but each of them kind of forms a challenge for how to describe the way it is unique, which is the way it is beautiful.
Yeah.
And I want you to maybe talk about just the challenge of writing about something. You can't kind of do an off-the-shelf description of a narwhal because Shakespeare didn't have any sonnets, or there's not a whole shelf of anthologies of narwhal poetry, although maybe I'm wrong.
If there is, I don't know it either, and I know we both read extensively. So yeah, so I guess do you want me to talk about like is this a craft question or like?
Well, craft, but also to adapt your eye so that you can appreciate lots of different. I mean, there's a huge variety of life here, and you're approaching each one in different ways, which requires more things of your spirit level too, not just your craft skills.
Yeah. I mean, I guess the easiest answer to that is, most of my friends, so I have writer friends now, most of my friends now are writers, I think, mostly. But growing up, none of them were. In fact, many of them were kind of like the left brain science or math, pre-engineer kind of type students. So, in order for us to just kind of relate, I've had to kind of learn to find a way to express astonishment and a little bit of my knowledge about these animals to friends to make it palatable, palatable. Like, I always joke I'm either the best or the worst dinner party guest, who could talk about the vampire squid for an hour, but I'd say 90% of the people probably won't. Oh, I don't know. Maybe I'm overstating that. Maybe let's 70% won't find that so interesting. But I can make it interesting for about, half an hour, like stunningly interesting. And I think maybe that's a little bit, that carries on a little bit to my writing, I hope anyway. My hope is that these are, again, going back to what I said earlier, these are expressions now as a 45-year-old woman, going back to that kid I was at 4 or 5, saying, look at the moon, look at this tree. I mean, I don't think you have to teach kids at that age to say look or to express wonderment. It just happens naturally. So these are the way I tried to describe these is so that enthusiasm would be contagious. It would be like electrifyingly off the page contagious for the enthusiasm, and to feel my enthusiasm for it. And in that way, my hope is once you get to know a little bit about these plants and animals, you'll feel like you know them a little bit too, and you'll want to protect them. Yeah. So it's that was kind of a way to also to cull down my original 200 plants and animals.
No arc.
Yeah, what's that? Yeah, yeah. Exactly.
But in some way, you include people in this as well. I mean, because you're not looking at your family as part of a habitat or any way, but you're writing about people that you love who are treated that way because they're different from some of the people around them.
Mm-hmm.
And in that way, there's a deep thread of sadness and anger that in this book as well. That it's not just wonder. It's it's asking some questions of how we ask certain species or certain people or certain events to be wonderment chimneys. And
Yeah.
I wonder if you can talk about that aspect of the book as well, because it seems quite important.
Yeah, I mean, this is definitely, for me, and in this book, I tried to show that being outside was a place of wonderment and safety for me. And I know that that comes from a place of privilege to say I'm not, I'm highly aware of that. Like, I have many friends who do not feel safe being in the woods, period, or anywhere near the ocean, period. But for my parents in particular, and I didn't have the vocabulary for this when I was in 6th grade and I saw it happen, people would talk to my mom, my like super intelligent, super wicked smart, multiple degreed mom. They would talk to her. Cashiers would say like, hello, do you understand? This is $3.50, whatever, things like that. And I would be so burning with, I think, anger and rage, but I didn't do anything. I would just sit there and watch, like kind of a little bit embarrassed, kind of angry as well. But the place where I never saw my parents clench up or be nervous or feel insecure about was in their garden or any nursery situation in the outdoors. So I think that kind of carried on to me as well. Nobody, even if we were in a nursery, people who worked in a plant nursery would ask my parents for help, that kind of thing. They're master gardeners. And so, but I had never seen books that featured Asian Americans outside. Like, I literally, we were talking about all the things from the 80s and 90s, Madonna concerts and jelly bracelets, all those movies and books. I just drank up MTV all the time. I never saw any depiction of a single Asian American literally walking outside, let alone like hiking or gardening or anything. It was just like as if we didn't exist, period. So you kind of just take that, or I anyway, kind of internalize that, like, are we not supposed to be outside? Like what? Why is there, I mean, obviously people are outside, but why is nobody putting Asian Americans outside in books or TV or movies? And I just got, and all the books that I read as a kid and through high school and through college and currently, I just was kind of like, who gets to decide what stories there are to be told about the outdoors, and who gets to describe animals and why, and who doesn't, for example. And so I kind of wrote the book that I've just been wanting to find in a library since I was 7, Milkweed was so wonderful. I wanted them to show my brown skin in my author photo, not just the traditional black and white. I wanted people to see that this is a brown woman writing about the outdoors, and I'm not a scientist, but these were my observations and my interactions with being outside, and definitely involving my family as well, because I also never saw like an Asian American mother, an Asian American daughter. I mean, there's just, to be outside is just such a simple thing that maybe some people take for granted, but I can't, I was so hungry to see that, even just depicted in one scene of one chapter, and it was just not ever there.
You write about your parents who live in Central Florida, although I think your mother is not there right now.
She's here, thankfully, in Oxford, yeah.
Sort of drove and picked her up. I understand that impulse, but you describe her approach to the garden and the narrativization of of the dramas that happen. And I just spent my summer outdoors in a park reading about trees and how trees have underground networks of message passaging capacities,
Yeah, yeah.
and I wonder, how's her garden going right now? And she must be missing it terribly right now.
She is, but yeah, it's so great. I love that you're reading about that. I was reading about that not too long ago too, the underground kind of connections and the warnings that trees give each other and things like that. She's definitely missing it a lot. My dad is still there tending to everything, but every morning they have like a check-in on FaceTime, like, oh,
She has to walk around and show the
yeah.
garden.
And my mom correcting him, like, you're not watering that correctly, this and that. So my poor dad. But as a, we have a garden here. I have a native flower garden, so it is weeded the best it's ever been all summer. Like I let her go to town, and some of my neighbors joke, if your mom gets bored, send her over to our house, so she's plenty busy here with my garden. So I had to suffer the questions of like, how could you do this? This tomato is not staked correctly, and but now everything's in order. It's nice and neat. So it's a win-win. I get the benefit of a perfectly manicured garden. She gets, that's her medicine, but it's still amazing hot here. So she only works in the mornings and the evenings.
Yeah, you describe it. You have a really nice line. It's like a sleeping dragon's breath.
Yes.
Mississippi.
Yeah, it really is. It really is. Today we caught a breeze and my 10-year-old was like, is that a breeze? Like it had been so long since he actually felt a breeze outside. So, yeah.
Let me see if there's any questions here.
Yeah.
Not for Carrie Arsenal, although we both are fans of Carrie Arsenal.
Yes, Carrie.
These are just notes to.
Yeah, as I tell my students, no question is too big, too small, fire away. And also, I'm curious to hear from the people who are tuned in, like, where are you all zooming in from? I always want to know that. It can't be everyone's from Seattle. If you want to drop that in the chat, where are you zooming in from? California. Oh my goodness, my heart is with all of you in the California area. Is it true? Like I asked my brother-in-law because I couldn't believe it. He lives just outside of Oakland. I was like, please tell me that is a filter right now. Have you seen these pictures, John? Of the San Francisco Bridge area, the Bay Area? It's like, it's as orange as my couch.
It's as orange as, yeah. No, it's pretty incredible.
It looks like this is the surface of Venus or Mars or something. I mean, it's horrifying. Yeah, like Michelle was saying, a apocalyptic movie set. Yeah. Paraguay. Oh, wonderful. How lovely.
Oh, wow.
Cleveland.
Aimee, there's a question in the Q&A that below. What Asian American lit do you recommend, even if not about being outside?
Sure. Well, for poetry, I mean, one of many amazing things now is that I think we're in such a renaissance of Asian American literature that's going on right now. One of my favorite, actually two of them are two essay collections I can give off the top of my head. Kathy Park Hong's, oh my gosh, why am I blanking on the name? Do you know what I'm talking about, John? Oh my gosh, I need coffee. Kathy Park Hong has a brand new essay collection. It's on my nightstand. I can go get it. So I would recommend Kathy Park Hong, and then Sejal Shah has a new collection of essays as well. And then from poetry, oh my goodness, it's a bevy of people. There's Monica Sock. She's also a Copper Canyon pressmate. But anytime I see one of her poems, I drop what I'm doing and I read her. I feel a little guilty because he's one of my dearest friends. Oh, Minor Feelings. Oh my gosh, of course. I was gonna say Minority Feelings. Minor Feelings. Yes, thank you. Joseph Olagaspi has a terrific collection called Threshold, but it's his first collection, Imago, and I'll type it out here, that my undergrads just go crazy for, and it's been out for some time now, but it's kind of coming of age. It's a gay coming of age kind of look at the male body and desire and family all together, and it's just it's beautiful. That's the one I always keep coming back to. But yeah, there's and then oh gosh, this was such a huge hit. last year, and I just chatted with her a little bit earlier, but my sons now have been reading it. It's Good Talk by Mara Jacob, and it's a graphic memoir. So there's a little something there for everybody. If you like graphic memoir, essay collections, and poetry. You know, I haven't been reading much fiction lately, honestly, but Asian American fiction lately, anyway. So yeah, but it's the poetry and essays that I've just been drinking up.
Do you ever read Paper Menagerie by Ken Liu?
I haven't.
It's a quite incredible story collection. But
Good.
when you were describing putting away all the peacocks, the story revolves around a boy whose mother is sort of convinces him that a paper menagerie of animals that she makes come to life. And then he suddenly feels embarrassed about this, and
oh my gosh, I love that.
It's Liu, Liu.
Okay.
And it won like the Nebula. It won 3 kind of fantasy awards the year it came out.
Fantastic. I think short stories is what I can manage right now.
It's really hard, isn't it?
So hard. It's so hard. I'm in the middle. It's not Asian American. I'm in the middle of reading Luster by Raven Leilani, and that's very exciting. It's so good. It's so good.
Yeah, she was in my class
really?
at NYU. She's so brilliant. She would crank out these exercises in class where I just thought, why am I here? I'm just gonna leave the room, leave you to it. I'll try to do anything. Someone has a question about how long does it take to go from putting pen to paper to having a kind of finished poem? Do you have a range of answers for that?
I do, but I want to hear your answer for that, because I was gonna, one of my things that I was gonna ask you if we had a dead spot is just, to me, you're just one of the hardest working writers I know. Like, and yet in my mind, I picture you just lounging in parks all the time. And so I'm like, I know that that's not happening, because you seem to have like 5 projects at any given time, plus more for the future, and you do them all so well. Your poetry, of course, is what I'm always going to be drawn to first, but how do you, like, is there one that comes over essay? Does poems come natural to you too? I actually don't know. I mean, does poems come quicker to you, than say a finished essay, or do you go through many revisions of an essay, to say nothing of all your editing things that you've done?
I think, one thing I love so much about World of Wonder is how it's sort of between poetry and prose, although it's very clearly narrative driven. It doesn't kind of pull into an eddy and stop, but it has associative logic working within it in a way that is closer to poetry than prose. And when I wrote Dictionary of the Undoing, I found a register that I could not be writing the typical form of essay which I had always written, which felt like it needed a lot of carpentering, and sort of sawing and then raise the barn all in one go, and otherwise it falls apart. And so finding that in between register was really important. And one of the books that made me think it was possible, and I'm sure you could probably talk about this, was Ross Gay's catalog of
well, for that's his poems. But Book of Delights was this.
Book of Delights. When he said that he basically sat down every day and just tried to figure out something that was delighting him, and it doesn't always come off that way.
Yeah.
I wonder if you were working together and showing each other your essays when he was writing that book and you were writing this one, or if they were overlapped.
Yeah, there definitely was some overlap there. I had this idea for these short kind of illustrated. I thought every single one would be illustrated on almost every page, and I realized, oh, that's not going to happen exactly. But I always had it in mind to have these short kind of essays of times that I was astonished by a plant or an animal. And yeah, absolutely. We were one of the first readers of each other's you know, like I would draft something that morning or that night and then send it to him in the morning and vice versa. And it's a practice, you know. I definitely was not doing this every day by any means, you know. I teach full time and have kids and a partner that I wanted to be there for as well. But it's definitely, you know, there was actually a terrific question here in the chat, like how did you do this, you know, for example, when you're surrounded by concrete? And you know, and I always, you know, and definitely there was times where I was not outside. I lived, you know, 15 years in Western New York, and I'm not a winter person, so I was inside a lot, much to my chagrin. But there was lots of looking out the window, and for when I teach nature writing and when I teach environmental literature, there's plenty that we can do just from looking outside. You know, I have my grad students and my undergrads at a different level keep something called a sky journal, where it's literally you just need to have a window and you teach yourself, say, 3 types of clouds that you learn to identify, so that no matter where you are, you could say, oh, that is a cumulonimbus, that is a cirrus, you know, that kind of thing. If you can just set yourself little goals like that, like, oh, I can identify, I'm going to memorize the 12 names of the moon, the Native American names of the moon, like the sturgeon moon, the corn moon, you know, things like that. Those are all small little things, especially in a pandemic, that you can do indoors, you know, and to write about it in just like a spiral notebook. It doesn't need to be anything fancy. I'm sure most writers have just oodles of blank notebooks. Just designate one of them as a sky journal. Sketch, even if you're a crappy drawer, sketch whatever you see outside. Sketch what the sun looks like at sunset. Sketch shadows on a desk, you know, just to keep that kind of track and that practice, because it's hard, you know. I mean, we were talking beforehand, John, about opening up the news. I have to, like, I can feel my shoulders tensing up, you know, before I see, oh, what now? What happened today? You know, is the world still here? Are we in martial law? What is going on? You know, it's hard to just be walking around and say, I'm going to find wonder, you know. I mean, the reality is that doesn't happen for me. And it's harder in 2020 than it ever has been in my whole life. And I'm an extrovert and I'm an optimist. And I'm telling you that it is the hardest year for me to feel that sense of astonishment and wonder. So if that helps at all, don't beat yourself up over it, because I am having that trouble as well. And I think it's important to share that too. And I think it's also okay to have trouble doing it, you know?
That's what I really loved about some of those essays that Ross wrote, was that he writes about his failures. He writes about the days that he just simply can't feel glad about anything. The sort of collapse of the optimist tent.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
You know, you've just described that very well, what that feels like, you know. And I think one thing I like about nature writing is it shows the attempt to be to find wonder. It doesn't. It's not a pre-gone conclusion. It's not like John Muir walking around sawing through sort of fields of wonder. You know,
Yeah.
It's you know, it's what you describe, and it's not the sky. It's trying to capture the changes in light as it comes through a dirty New York window.
Yeah. No, really, really, it is. And you know, again, I think back to the 4-year-old in all of us. That word "look," it's so common. And something happens, I think, around junior high, where we don't share our astonishments anymore, or somehow it's deemed uncool to say, look, you know. Someone asked on Twitter, I saw something, there was a meme going around, what's the most on-brand story from your childhood that describes kind of who you are today? And I didn't answer this because I was doing 5 million things, but one thing I can tell you is that I actually caused a car accident and bike accident because I screamed just on a walk and I said, look, and it was a daffodil. So the person on the bike that just happened to be walking by looked over too, crashed into a car. Nobody got hurt, but the car was damaged. The person was thrown off a bike, all because about 16-year-old Aimee shouted out in glee, look, at a flower, you know. And in my defense, I was living in Western New York and we had just had a hard summer. but I caused a 3-car accident and a bicyclist by shouting, "Look at this flower," you know? So I think part of this book is just maybe it's a gentle reminder. I also don't want there to be toxic, what is the phrase now that I'm hearing? Toxic positivity. I don't want that to happen, but it's just maybe a gentle reminder that not all is terrible right now, you know, and that there's, and you know, we have reasons to be hopeful, you know. We have, oh, Margaret Atwood said a great thing a few days ago. She had a wonderful Zoom event, and it was something like our future is not written yet. Our future is not written yet, and I thought that was so beautiful. So why would we give up now? You know. So, yeah. Anyway.
That's sorry, I just saw another. I was going to say that's like the perfect ending. Like you're on optimism. This is a question for me about. Oh, you're with some MFA students from University of San Francisco, and I think this would apply to you as well, Aimee, about getting early, because you have a very diverse acknowledgments page. Yes. In terms of you know, from a Droit journal, you know, down to the very last publication. I wrote for newspapers in San Francisco and other places when I was starting out as a writer, because it was the easiest thing to do. I also, you know, I think, Aimee, you can attest to this. When you go to university and you study English, you're kind of useless, but you can maybe write about a book. And I was able to get a few book reviews assigned, and there's a long tradition of not snarky book reviewers making a living, you know, squid vampiring the blood out of living creative writers, but rather, you know, learning how to, as Aimee and I were talking about tonight, love something by describing it well.
Yeah.
You know, appreciating it. And Virginia Woolf did it. You know, V.S. Naipaul, Saul Bellow, poets all do it almost. Virtually all poets, you know, start out reviewing in some form or other. So I would encourage your students to find places that still assign reviews, and there are hundreds. The ecosystem that we've kind of barely touched in Aimee's book of the world is the same as the ecosystem of publishing in terms of journals. So yeah, my first publications were a book review in the city pages of Minneapolis, you know.
Oh my goodness. Yeah, and I didn't even mention that. John, you are such a prolific book reviewer as well. Like, so you just have so many hats and you do them so well. But that's actually something too that I'm trying to get with to kind of impress upon my students a little bit more too, is that one of the most helpful things starting out is just getting that vocabulary, that critical vocabulary of what you fall in love with. And it's also that helps you be a good kind of community member, you know. You get to see what is out there, what is doing something that you hadn't seen before in a book, and what and to champion other writers, you know. And that's just some of my most I don't know, still to this day, I still, when I read a new book that I don't think people have been talking about, I can't wait to shout about it, you know. I can't wait to talk about it. Anyway, so that's so I know that's one kind of publication, but I would say, you know, one little tidbit. I was talking with a high school in Montreal this morning. This is the beauty of Zoom, you know, stuff. And they were asking publishing advice, or I think it was freshman class at university. And, you know, I will say that there was a couple, more than a couple students in my MFA class who we just thought everybody knew. They were the most talented. Everything they wrote was close to being gold and done. I would be nervous when they were, or I would be excited when they were up because I couldn't wait to see their poems, you know. And they got really discouraged, I think, really quick with a couple rejections. And it's kind of a shame. I don't think they're writing too much anymore. I've kind of lost track, but they were the ones that, I mean, everybody would just be in such reverent awe of these writers. And to that, I would just say, I think because every day I feel so stupidly grateful to be able to read and write. And to be in this kind of poetry community, this writing community, getting rejected it's not even, it's so hard for me to take it personally, because I just am like, well, oh, okay, that didn't work out this time, back to the drawing board. It's more, I don't know, it's easier said than done, I know. But all of this to say is that I was probably the most published person in my kind of era and in grad school. But I was also, and the part that people don't realize, the most rejected, if that makes sense. So for every, one rejection I would get, easily 15 to 20, times that was rejected. So I would just say, just keep going. You have the world at your oyster now. I sound so ancient when I say, in my day, we barely had the internet, but it's true. There's so many things where you could take out the table of contents, where you could subscribe to more journals than ever before. Such a diverse array of poetry journals out there, of literature journals. And you don't have to wait the 6-month agony of waiting for your stamped self-addressed envelope in the mail these days. Not too many places do that anymore. And so that's kind of a happy thing to take advantage of, So I would say just keep going. Just try to develop that armadillo shell, and just try to have as good-natured of an idea about it, There's so many things to be upset about. Publishing an XYZ magazine is simply not one of them, I think, and if it's not like, oh, it's easy to say now, Aimee, with X number of books. I absolutely, any of my roommates in college could hear, or in grad school would know that I was saying that same thing too. It was like laughing, like, oh my gosh, I'm so embarrassed. I sent this to 3-penny review. What was I thinking? I'm not ready, So it was much more of I don't know, it's like a game. It was a game to me.
Your first book came out in 2003?
Yeah. So when yeah, I mean, it just, the late 90s, it was venues that published online were so much looked down upon, that kind of thing, like, oh, this isn't a real legit journal, and that's absolutely not the case now. So it's exciting. It's exciting.
Yeah, I have had a few people, very few, ask me if LitHub would print their article, or if it was only online. I was like, yeah, that's not wrong.
Exactly, and LitHub is about as astonishingly, like, not only the content wise, but just the prestige, if there's, if you subscribe to that thing, of a venue out there, so.
Actually, we're running your essay tomorrow.
Oh, yeah, okay.
Yes. So if this hasn't convinced you, all 42 of you out there that are still there, if you haven't been convinced that World of Wonders is not wondrous enough for you, you have an opportunity to read part of it tomorrow.
Oh, that's such a nice surprise. Good, thank you.
I have one last, since we're getting to the end, and if it's too much to ask of you both, then it is. But Aimee, would you mind reading a paragraph or from the new book, or a poem from Oceanic, and John likewise? I just think to bring the books that way, because everyone, you've been talking so wonderfully about what's in the work, but I think a little bit of the work would be lovely for people to hear as we get ready to end this.
Okay, maybe just a short paragraph here. Let me see. Okay. This is from the comb jelly, which is not actually a jellyfish, but if you don't know what a comb jelly is, I'll type it in here. It's like, its job is to make rainbows in the ocean, to be just luminescent. So you'll need to Google that to see what I mean. It just flashes rainbows. And so just a little paragraph about what they look like. The comb jelly is a creature of delicacy. It doesn't sting, and it's not actually a jellyfish. It belongs to a whole other phylum, Ctenophora. Comb jellies can be as small as a single grain of rice, or they can grow to over 4 feet in width, large enough in theory to gobble up a plump second grader whole. I wrote that when I had a second grader, and he was terrified. He started crying. And I left it in. Now he thinks it's funny. He's in 8th grade. And he's like, Mom, please don't tell that story, but I did it anyway. All right. And large enough in theory to gobble up a plump second grader whole. but they won't because they are too busy waving their hair-like cilia around, too busy eating various fish eggs, too busy eating other comb jellies. So there you go. So a little snippet of one of my favorite little creatures in the ocean.
One of the lovely things about Aimee's book is it will reprogram the algorithms that your Google has been inhaling. So it's no longer dunk from free throw line or Honda Civic versus F-150 drag race. It's, you know, suddenly I've got a billion sort of animals.
That's great.
I want to read just a very brief poem from this, which is a book about climate change and inequality. So, and it's like 35 writers from around the world. And I was going to read, I'll read as much of this poem by Tishani Doshi as I can fit into one reading. She would read it so much more beautifully if she were here, because she's, like Aimee, a wonderful reader. But I wanted to read this because Aimee also writes about butterflies, monarchs. This is called A Blue Mormon Finds Himself Among Common Emigrants. It's uncertain why they're here. Pretty sure it's the same old sob story. No food in the fields, government gassing their kids, neighbors throwing bombs on their homes. Shall we go down to the shore and save them? They have such short lives, such unpronounceable names. Wouldn't it be better if they stayed put? Do they watch clouds or collect shells? Can we know? So many die along the way. Think about their lives in far Bombay, subsisting on the underside of leaves, trying not to get shot in the head while hanging upside down from a tree. Think of Nabokov, that crafty taxonomist, filling note cards with their habits, the original climate refugees. I spoke to one, a Blue Mormon. Do you know how difficult it is to be so beautiful, he said. Stuff happens to beautiful creatures. It's unsettling. All those nets and hours in glass jars, all those snot-nosed boys playing pin the specimen. Did I mention they have a fanatical approach to breeding? Sometimes, the Blue Mormon complained, when we don't get enough food, we emerge as dwarves. This is distressing. How to explain there are no perfect conditions? There's always too little rain or too much. Someone's bound to give you a bad TripAdvisor review. But why all this swarming across highways and lemon ribbons of heat? Why the cluster around hilltops and lakes? Why not gather less visibly in locations less elite? Goes without saying, they'll seduce our old parents and get them to sign off the property deeds. Our wives will be kneeling at altars of Ziara. We must proceed with caution. Maybe we could give them wristbands or pin yellow stars in their tails. Maybe we should build fences or draw crosses on the wing-like doors of their tents. In America, at least, they fix them with sensors so they can monitor where they go. We must think about the environment. It's too soon to talk about deportation. Certainly, it would be barbaric to separate children from their parents. How shameful the aberrant Blue Mormon is, shrugging off his feathery vest, singing his sad song of asylum. Do you think I'd be fleeing unless I had to? And with these common emigrants, they're just insects. But me, I'm different, can't you see? That's lovely Tishani Doshi, whose poems are really worth checking out, and is also Copper Canyon.
That's right. So we did not plan that. We did not plan that.
Yes, this is all one big fundraiser.
Yeah. Surprise, you've been roped into a fundraiser for Copper Canyon. No, she's a delightful, she's a dancer, she's an extraordinary poet. So if you don't know Tishani Doshi's work, please.
Also writes fiction.
Yes, that's right, novelist as well. Yeah.
Anything else, you two? I mean, both are, you're a few time zones ahead of us here in Seattle, but you may.
I know, this is so wonderful, John. You did this, the fact that you did this after traveling literally across the ocean is, and you know, you helped set this all up. This, folks out there listening, I talk about, you know, community. John is one of, not only, I don't know, he's just such a great ambassador for writing and just being a good writer, like a good person, and just thank you so much, Jen. You're the one who set this all up,
Yeah, I've
and
wanted to talk to you for a while. I mean, I love your work, and I love just the beautiful complexity of it, and the way that you convey awe. I come from a California that was very in love with Bierstadt and the kind of yawning, heavy foot pedals of Presbyterian, religiosity about the environment. And so to see someone with such a nimble, descriptive capacity and so much heart writing across different genres and collaborating well, because we didn't even talk about your book with Ross Gay. It's a pleasure, and so, yeah, this is my chance to be like, look.
There you go. What was the thing you said in the beginning? I think that's like the perfect dragging about the book. You said this book is like someone, what is it? You said something so funny. I'll have to look at it, the recording. Do you remember you said this book, you felt like I was saying, I don't know, watch out or something? I don't know.
I feel like it's a really enthused person saying, did you know?
Yeah, did you know? I
Yeah.
love that. Oh my gosh, my close friends would be cracking up because that's exactly how they would describe me. Anyway, well, thank you, Rick. And
Thank you both. When did you last see each other, actually, though, since you brought this up a little bit?
Miami. Was it Miami? A couple
I
years
saw you at a poetry reading in Miami, but I think the more substantive encounter was sadly at that Brian Doyle Memorial.
Oh yes, that's right. An AWP. Yeah.
And you acknowledge him in your acknowledgments as a kind of guiding light towards the type of writing you do, and yeah, I can see it.
I wish so much I could have put this in his hands. When I was a poetry editor of Orion, he would talk about someone who says, did you know, or it just has that spirit of astonishment, with him. That was him. And I've saved all my emails. I can't bear to delete them. Anyway, so yeah, that's right. We saw each other at his tribute. Yeah.
Which Carrie Arsenal.
Yes, Carrie
full
was there
circle.
too. Full circle.
Was, I think, the person who arranged.
Yes, that's right. And now this ends up being a tribute to Brian Doyle again. So, as it should be.
There are those people, like we were, Randall Keenan died recently, and I'd worked with him briefly, but didn't know him. And it just, suddenly you realize that there are these people that are powering, giant systems of lots of other book people, booksellers, writers, teachers, and that they're the center of a vast hub. And he seemed like one of them. And, I think you are too, Aimee. I think you should give yourself credit for that, because
oh, well, you're very
a lot
sweet.
of people feel that way. So before we sort of crawl inside each other and have a hug, I want to thank everyone who came and stayed out. And Karen, Rick, thank you for having us.
Well, Karen and I both thank you, and everyone at Elliott Bay. Thank you, and all the people who came to this from Australia and Paraguay, and I think a good part of Florida has been in here, and parts to the Northeast, and Heidi Seaborn, who's just down the hill from me here, and here in West Seattle, and many others. So, and both of you with these amazing and beautiful books, which we have, and I did leave out the Lit Hub part, John. So, because that's another hat, and you not in there so much every once in a while you've got an interview or something like that, or conversation, but helping get writers published in there, and that's such a vital daily dose of good writing and good thought, and especially necessary for now. So both of you, again, someday we'll get to do this again in a room together with everyone that we can possibly get from wherever they can be there. And thank you both. I've got some other book things to send you after this, so we'll be in touch. Yes. Anyway, thank you all. Good night.
Good night.
Thanks very much.
Yes.
Thanks, John. Take care.
Bye.
Thanks.
Bye.
Bye, everybody.
Bye.